Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to your Daily Penguin. This is our tour through my Penguin Classic wall, and sometimes it's been predictable, but lately it has not been. Lately we haven't known where we were going to bounce from one thing to the next. I didn't do a Penguin Classic yesterday. I wasn't feeling all that well. I'm not feeling all that well now, but the Bean wanted to see you, and I have a great Penguin Classic to show you today. It's once again unpredictable, but well worth your time. This is Alexis de Tocqueville, Democracy in America. This is a volume that was put together by, it was translated by Gerald Bevan, who did not have a history before this volume of translating anything in this time period, but does a very good job, very lively job. And it has an introduction and notes by Isaac Kramnik. And this is a book that quite a few people have heard about without ever having read. It's de Tocqueville was a wiry young aristocrat, tiny little thing, mouse little thing, huge owl-like eyes, virtually inaudible voice, who teamed up with Gustave de Beaumont, another young friend of his, and came to America in 1831 in order to write a treatise about America. Now they got that commission for two reasons. One, they said they wanted to study American penal systems, an unbelievably fruitful subject, more so today than ever before. The American penal system is a world unto itself in 2020, a world of such staggering evil and size that most Americans don't have the slightest idea of what it is. They think their county jail. If you ask them about the American penal system, they think about their county jail. They have no idea how many Americans are incarcerated. They have no idea what percentage of Americans per capita do not have their physical liberty. They have no idea what huge percentage of people living in that alternate world are there for the tiniest of technicalities, for things that are only on paper crimes, and that don't warrant incarceration, much less incarceration for life. They have no idea how many extrajudicial murders are committed in that alternate reality. No idea what is slavery in all but name that is perpetuated and always has been in that alternate world. Most Americans have no idea about that other America. And it was to study the embryonic version of that other America that Beaumont and Tocqueville came to this country. But really there was another reason as well, and that was that in the 1820s, America was a vogue. It was a way that you could get a book deal. It was a way that you could guarantee book sales. Everyone was fascinated by this new republic that seemed to be gaining strength instead of losing it. See, the prediction for instance, in 1800, in 18 teens, the prediction everywhere in the intelligentsia had been that America would fall apart. That yes, thanks to the British Empire's vast obligations to defend its far-lying precincts elsewhere, and yes, thanks to the long interim of the ocean to transport troops, to transport instructions, that yes, America had temporarily broken away from the parent stem, but that this new republic would fall apart. It was, anybody who'd ever been there knew that the one thing that all Americans are united on, the one thing that Americans do better than they do anything else, is fight with other Americans. And everybody knew that. Everybody saw that and thought, okay, so this doesn't have long to last, but it is fascinating to watch as it grows, as this new thing takes shape right in front of us. And that was only accentuated by the French Revolution, which took a radically different course. And everybody saw that in the newspapers and in discussions in coffee houses every day. Beaumont and de Tocqueville had, therefore, a rich audience for this work. And they came here, and they stayed for almost a year, and Beaumont was more interested in getting to know people and glad-handing people. He was not a reedy little thing. He was not an introvert, and he left most of the researching and the writing to de Tocqueville, and de Tocqueville quickly abandoned even the pretext of writing only about the American penal system, and instead wrote about the America that he found. And boy, oh boy, did he write a classic. It's a quintessential thing you can say about America, that one of our founding classics is not written by an American. This is an essential document, certainly in understanding America in the 1830s. There have been many, many historians and pundits and, God forbid, politicians who have maintained forever afterwards, for 150 years, that this is an essential document for understanding America just in general. That this, like Crevecoeur's letters, also observations on an embryonic America, also by someone who's not an American, that this is essential in understanding the nature of the country, that somehow de Tocqueville saw in its childhood the nature of the adult beast. I think that's putting a little too much weight on this book. It's a little unfair to charge it with prescience or to expect prescience of it, but boy, oh boy, is it good, regardless of whether or not it's accurate in its... I mean, it's very accurate in a way in its observations about the America of the day. De Tocqueville was just the right kind of person on just the right kind of quest to get introduced to everybody. Got introduced to the president, got introduced to ex-presidents, got introduced to... His credit was good wherever he went. So it's invaluable that he wanted to write a warts and all first-hand account of everything that he was seeing. And that would make it valuable and worth study anyway, but he's also a very entertaining writer. Every time I go back to this book, I find some element in it that I didn't notice the first few times that I read it. It's extremely intelligent, but it's also very funny. It reverts to humor quite often. There's a playfulness about it that you wouldn't think when you see, it's had 80 million editions, and I'm sure that parts of it have been taught in schools, probably to very unwilling students. But it's actually a work of sparkling personality. So this is a terrific Penguin volume. It has ancillary essays as well that de Tocqueville wrote about America. In fact, I think this volume has everything that de Tocqueville ever wrote about America, because this was a hit when it came out, and forever afterwards he was sought after by people at parties, by soirees, and also by publishers to write more about America. And I think this volume has everything that he wrote about America. But it's mainly democracy in America, and this is a fundamental work. It's something that you have probably, like I mentioned, you've probably heard it mentioned more often. Probably there's a greater chance you've heard it mentioned than there's a chance that you've read it, even in English. But it is well worth your time to read. My main point is that although it is, in a way, in an odd kind of way, fundamental, it's also fun. It's also enjoyable to read. And you follow de Tocqueville through his many digressions. Sometimes he's really good at laying the explicit expository groundwork of where he is and who he's talking to and what he's doing. Sometimes he's not all that good at it, and that's just understandable. That vogue hadn't yet taken shape when he wrote this book, so it's a little more impressionistic than later audiences would maybe want. And to correct that, I don't think it needs correcting. You'll get swept up in this book, regardless of what kind of a thorough soup to nuts job de Tocqueville is doing. You'll get swept up in it. But in order to correct that, if that is a fault for you, fortunately, I have a Penguin adjacent recommendation that takes aim squarely at the sometimes diffuse nature of this book in order to fix it. And that is this. This is George Wilson Pearson, Tocqueville in America. I believe this is a beautiful Johns Hopkins paperback, and this is from 1938, so going on 100 years old. But this does exactly that. This holds de Tocqueville to his travel itineraries the whole time, and it instead of being it's a wise decision that Pearson made, not just to annotate Democracy in America, but rather to write this book. Because this walks you through all the preparations for the trip, all the people who were involved. Things that get mentioned in passing by de Tocqueville are given their full due. Here it mentions the trip, it mentions the arrival, and then it follows de Tocqueville and Beaumont through their whole time in America. And it describes for you the significance of all the people that they meet. It describes the significance of all the places that they go, and it compares as many of those people and as many of those places to other contemporary documents as can be found. Invaluable to dig through and do that. You can be relied upon to find a scholar to do this sort of thing with virtually every formative American volume of one kind or another. For instance, somebody did it about the Declaration of Independence. Another person did it about the journals of Lewis and Clark. You can find somebody to do this on almost every volume, and it's always a lucky thing for readers when one takes off like this one did. Because this came out in 1938, but it has been reprinted ever since. When did this paperback come out? 1996, and it's had other reprints between then and when it first appeared. This is another huge book. It's bigger than de Tocqueville's book, but it's well worth your time. If you're interested in de Tocqueville's Democracy in America, this is an indispensable companion to that volume. Just indispensable. Because it lays out for you all the context, and de Tocqueville often doesn't bother to give you that. And it, needless to say, quotes extensively from de Tocqueville, so it's not a substitute for Democracy in America, but it's an indispensable companion to it. And there's one other Penguin adjacent recommendation that I want to make. This is the late Hugh Brogan. This is his life of de Tocqueville, because de Tocqueville, he is forever associated with Democracy in America, and it's kind of fruitless in one way to say there was a lot more to him than that one masterpiece, but there was. He's a fascinating figure in his own right, and he had lots of other interests, and a whole bunch. He lived a whole life aside from the 9 months that he was in America. So, a biography is a worthy endeavor, and boy, oh boy, is this one great. This is the last thing Hugh Brogan ever wrote. He wrote a very good book on John F. Kennedy. He wrote the Longlist History of the United States that was then remade into the Penguin History of the United States that I recommend to all of you. Whenever anybody comes on, and long before there were any of you, long before there was a booktube, when I was just recommending things to ordinary people, actual in-my-face people, people would often ask me, what is a really engaging one-volume history of the United States? And much as it galls me to say that my number one choice for that is written by someone who wasn't an American, whose middle name was Vercingetorix, I still say yes, it's Hugh Brogan's Penguin History of the United States. That is a volume that's still in print. As far as I know, it should stay in print forever. It's terrific. Absolutely terrific. It's a one-volume answer to Samuel Eliot Morrison's 3-volume History of the United States. Morrison's book books collected into one book are fantastic, absolutely. But Brogan's is even better, and just as full of aphorisms, just as full of wit and erudition. And he wrote that book, I don't remember how many years before. He wrote it many years before this one. This is the last thing that he ever wrote. I think he just died in 2019. But this is a grand, wonderful soup to nuts biography of the author of Democracy in America. It will give you all the context for de Tocqueville that he, of course, doesn't give you in his book. So your Penguin Classic today is a wholehearted recommendation. Whether you are an American or whether you are a nervous watcher of America who lives outside the country, de Tocqueville is not by any means celebrating this new country. And a lot of what he says in this book, a lot of his foremost criticisms, apply even more so today. He was not impressed by the way the masses of America, low education, low information voters is the term that was coined for the 2016 U.S. presidential election. Low information voters. They existed in massive numbers in the 1830s, and de Tocqueville saw them and thought, in a representative republic where most of these low information people can vote, this is a recipe for disaster. Most of these people only want to hear what they want to be told, and the spirit of inquiry, as he put it, is not exactly strong in a lot of the people that he met. He wasn't willing usually to ascribe much potential danger to that fact, because the America that he was going through, riding through and steamboating through it, or paddle boating through in 1830, in that America, most of those low information voters or low information citizens didn't vote, couldn't vote, wouldn't have wanted to vote, and weren't at all affected by people who voted or by anything that was voted for. In his worst moments, de Tocqueville could see what Alexander Hamilton saw perfectly clearly almost a generation before. Hamilton saw it with crystal clarity, like he was using some sort of crystal ball. And that is that the more technology improves, the more waterways are used as roads, the more roads are improved, the more roads are lit, the more the frontier is quote unquote pacified, the more tightly drawn those low information citizens will be to the decisions made by voters. Hamilton thought in his unguarded private moments that that would certainly lead to a clamor for a greater franchise. But the more those people realized that their pockets were being picked and their cities were being regulated by people who were put in power by voters, the more they would want to vote. And, a generation later, de Tocqueville saw the same thing. And all of that is absolutely fascinating to read in these formative years. I think that's why so many politicians go back to Tocqueville to quote from him or to misread him. But he's fascinating for you to read as well, because he's watching America, but he is not American, and he's about as smart as they come. Maybe that's not true of Beaumont, but it's definitely true of de Tocqueville. About as sharp as they come. Wasn't really hoodwinked by much of what he saw, even though by the time his progress through parts of the country was better known, by the time advance word of it was reaching cities before he got there, there were many attempts to shuck and jive him, to show him some sort of facade instead of the reality, and he saw through it instantly. All of those attempts, and some of the sarcasm that he expends on that in this book is priceless. So it's your Penguin Classic for today is a distinct recommend. This is a classic that is well worth being a classic. It's well worth your time and energy to look through. And that's going to do it for today. I will try to make a daily Penguin video tomorrow. We will see how that goes. But who knows what we'll encounter then. Could be something that I'm only meh about. We shall see. I'm going to wrap this up for now, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.